fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Traversing Stars podcast, third season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. This is an amazing episode because Paul Kupperberg boards the mothership. We discuss his new book, Direct Creativity. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Kupperberg. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing Stars podcast.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
So my pleasure, sir. I'm a big fan of yours. So I will often, I always start with a question of inspiration. What inspired your love for comics and who your earliest influences?
Wow, there were a lot of them. I discovered comics when I was, 3, 4 years old in the late 1950s. When I was growing up, most of my favorites were, well, Superman was always. I mean, he was like the first superhero I really tweaked to, and just, never lost my love for the character. And But as far as the creators who influenced what I did, uh, Bob Kanigher, he was I didn't know who he was at the time, but I first started reading his stuff in the early '60s when he was doing Wonder Woman with Ross Andru and Mike Esposito. And it was goofy kind of kid stuff. That was the era of Merboy and Bird Boy and the Wonder Tot and all that. And it was silly, but I was 5, 6 years old, and I was silly. So the stuff was right in my wheelhouse. So he was one. Then I moved on to Gardner Fox and John Broom and this is just the writers. Bob Haney, certainly Arnold Drake, eventually Stan when I got a little older. So yeah, a lot of that stuff.
Well, you went from being a fan of comic books to what I've read, and this is accurate. I read that you have written 1,400 stories over a career of 45 years. Does that sound right?
It sounds about right. It's closer to 50 actually. Yeah, this year, April 3rd will be my 49th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, what's that like to go from a comic book fan to now this long, illustrious career as a comic book writer?
Dizzying. It's it's hard to believe it's been that long, all that, all those stories under the bridge. But yeah, it's kind of, I'm at a stage where, you start looking back. I actually I've written my comic book memoir that'll be coming out later this year. And so, I've been thinking about all the stuff I grew up on and where I came from and all that. And it's been, it's been interesting, but uh yeah, it's just, so lately the things like, I've been posting on my Facebook on social media about things that my 10-year-old me, my brain would explode if I knew what was coming. That I would be there with Julie Schwartz, not only getting to know him, but working for him and then becoming his friend. I
Hmm.
posted a picture of me and Joe Orlando. It's like, here's the guy who drew the original Sea Monkeys ads from the comic books, plus all the brilliant comic book work he did. But I got to know him and work with him and all these people. There's, dozens and dozens of those instances. So it's really become kind of the people and the history I was, part of or tangential to. So um it it's interesting.
So, having this wonderful 49-year career, um, what insights have that given you about the industry, either the nature of it, the nature of the work, and how has that impacted you going forward?
Well, the work is what, you do it for. I mean, when I broke into comics in 1975, I was part of a generation that was coming in. We'd grown up being fans and doing fanzines and just diving headfirst into this stuff for most of our lives. And we were the first generation really who grew up wanting to get into comic books because we didn't realize what a waste of a life it could be. But uh, but we it was an ambition. I didn't know what I would, I never thought it would be possible, but I also had no idea what I was going to do if it wasn't. So, I kind of left myself no options. But uh, in retrospect, it's look, on some levels, if you don't concentrate and focus on the work and what you get to do and how you're getting to, be part of these things you've loved your entire life, it's a pretty crappy business. I mean, it's big corporations who, it's a business built on the exploitation of talent. There's no getting around it. Even with royalties and all that, it's still, the creators are not compensated anywhere near what they should be, considering the type of money that gets made on some of these projects. And page rates. I don't know what they are these days, but I know they're probably not as high as what I was making in the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
So, for most people. So, it used to be you went in because you loved it. Now I think people go into it because it's a stepping stone, and that's probably a much smarter way to approach it.
So, having worked with all sorts of great writers and artists over that span of time, who offered you the best advice to work in the industry, and what was the advice?
Um, I guess a single piece of advice, just creative piece of advice, was Joe Kubert. He was my editor on Arion, Lord of Atlantis, and he was talking about specifically about Arion, but the advice applies to any comic you write. And he said to me after he took over as editor that he thought that I was relying too much on magic in the book.
Hmm.
He said, "There's too much magic on the book in the book." I said, "Well, it's about a magician." And he said, "Yeah, I know, but there's too much magic in the book. Don't, no." So, what he was saying was that I had become dependent on the magic, that I was using the magic as a crutch. My character didn't have to think or, fight it really. It wasn't a hardship for the character because all he had to do was, wave his hands and come up with that strange symbol Jan Dursuma came up with, and everything would be groovy. But that's good advice that there are shtick in comics. Every character has a shtick, but don't lean on it. Don't
Hmm.
make that the main focus of the character.
I think that so much because I always think when I read like Doctor Strange that there's always a reduction in tension because there's always a spell that he can come out with that somehow solves the problem. It's like, well, I'll just use this spell. It's like, oh, okay, well that solves that kind of nicely.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like Batman's utility belt. It's
Hmm.
like if he needs a mini acetylene torch, he's got one in his utility belt.
Right.
I hope, not near anything delicate. But it's that's comic books. There's always going to be that's part of the suspension of disbelief,
Hmm.
where you kind of go, well, of course, Doctor Strange has a spell, Batman has a gimmick,
Yeah.
Superman will, be able to eat the kryptonite. I don't know. It's always, there's always a way out because, of course, we're doing, ongoing serialized fiction, and
Oh,
there's always going to be a way out.
I agree with you. Like I said, another one would be like I said, you mentioned Superman that moves a planet, but yet grunts when he's stopping a train. It's like, well, if he can move a planet, stopping the train should not be an effort for him.
Well, but there are physics involved in stopping a train,
Good point. Good point.
as there are in stopping a planet. But you can't just go boom and stop a train. The train will still keep, the momentum keeps the train moving. And again, I don't know that when I was writing Superman, if I ever put that much thought into an action of his,
Mm,
because it didn't matter.
mm,
I think there's when I was reading comics, it was why does Superman do that? Because he's Superman.
mm.
you know, and then one day, I always say, and I used to do this to poke at my friend Marty Pasco, who wrote the story, but the day that they decided to write the story to explain why Clark Kent's glasses are a great disguise
Mhm.
was kind of the ruin of comic books.
Oh,
It's like,
I get that.
yeah.
I agree. I can't remember who it was, but there's been some people who I've actually seen in real life when they put their glasses on. You're like, you know what? You actually can. They do look different. So I'll give a little bit of that to the Superman people. You can take it from the glass and do look and it can look different. Um, but I think it's incredible is that when you're thinking about comic books, how much are you thinking character first or visual first?
Oh, character first.
Character.
Always. I mean, you can do visual first, and a lot of people do. I mean, uh, every time you open an issue, a Star Wars comic, and there's big spaceships on the splash panel, it's a comic book about spaceships, not about people.
Mm,
But yeah, it's always character first. I mean that, you'll come up with the dynamic shot for the character, but it's got to be based on the character, not just because, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have, a 1965 Impala crash through the 95th floor window of the Empire State Building?
yeah.
Yes, it would be cool, but to what end, sir? You know.
I think the one question, I mean, there's so many people who want to be in your shoes as had that career. What advice do you have for those who are the novice writers who are trying to figure out how to either break into the industry or write something worth being read by others?
Well, I don't know how to break into the industry anymore. Back in my day, we were just kind of, it was almost an open door policy. There was an acknowledgement, even by the old school people like Sal Harrison, who in 1975 had been in the comic book business for 40 years and had done color separations on, Famous Funnies #1 and Action Comics #1. Even he recognized that us punks were necessary because the previous generation were aging out. So, we were doing fanzines. Paul Levitz and I met in middle school, and we were doing fanzines, and we got to know the people up at DC, and Paul got hired in 1973 to a temporary position to assist Joe Orlando, and he never left. They tried to evict him, but he wouldn't go. Um, and um, so Sal Harrison had started apprentice programs in the early 70s. That's how David Michelinie got brought into the company. That's how I think it was trying to remember there was an artist who came in under a different apprentice program. A kid like Michael Uslan could do a course in comic books at his university and get called by Sal saying, "Come on in, let's talk."
Mm,
And eventually become an assistant editor. And as an assistant editor, he's like, "I don't like the DC logo. Can I redesign it? Sure, go ahead." That was the atmosphere in those days. Now, I don't even know who works at the companies anymore. Once DC moved out of New York and to LA, it became a different company. DC Comics used to be in New York. DC Entertainment is what's in LA.
mm,
It's different companies. I don't know how to break in, but I do know that the only way to write the best stuff you can is to really try really fucking hard
mm,
and to do it a lot and keep writing. And when someone says to you, when you show it to people and they go, "Ooh, that's not very good," you don't go, "Oh yeah, what do you know?" You say, "Really? Why?
mm,
What do you think, can I do better?" Take advice, take criticism. If someone tells you you suck, without without being malicious, but with a ask them why. Don't get angry. There's always there's always room for improvement. I still, I'm going through the manuscript for the memoir for the fifth time and
mm.
extensively rewriting because there's always ways to make it better. Um, and to write comics, I advise you to go out and purchase Paul Kupperberg's Illustrated Guide to Writing Comics, now available on Amazon.com or on paulkupperberg.net.
Very
No, I'm
cool.
kidding, but I'm not. I wrote that book a few years ago, and it's basic. It's like, here's how you start. Here's the difference, what's the difference between plot and story? Well, plot is what happens and story is why.
Yeah.
And I've had people come up to me, at signings and stuff and go, I got a great idea for a comic, and they proceed to tell me the plot. And when I ask them about the character and the story, because story always comes out of character. If you don't have a well-developed character, you're not going to have a well-developed story. You're just going to have, cut paper cutouts going through a dull plot, because
Hmm.
if there's no real character, there's really nothing at stake. Yeah.
Do, do you think is it an issue of patience in current writing? I mean, I find that it's kind of interesting. I find that like the most successful writers are always older, and the most successful artists, right, are the big ones at any given time are usually on the younger side. Is it just does it just take longer as a writer to break into the industry?
I think it takes I'm not going to say it takes longer to develop, but it's easier. Like when I was an editor at DC for 16 years, and I would get a lot of stuff in the mail. And I would get stories, I would get scripts, I would get plots, I would get artwork. And you can take artwork and look at it and make a decision in 5 seconds. With writing, I need to read 3 or 4 stories from this person, before I know what they can do. Anybody can write one good story.
Hmm.
Can you write three? Can you write four? So writing takes longer for people to evaluate. So comic books, it's easy. You look at the art, you flip through it, and you go, I love this guy's stuff. The writing is almost secondary, and it takes longer to evaluate.
Hmm. Well, currently you have a new book on Kickstarter that talks to 18 professionals about the world of comic books called Direct Creativity, which is a cool name. So what inspired you to go and talk to these 18 people and create this book about being a comic book professional?
Well, I've done two previous books of interviews. One was direct comments, which were uh, 1990 era interviews I conducted for DC's Direct Currents newsletter, which I used to write for them. And I found these transcripts of these interviews from around 89, 90, 91, and, you know, fixed them up and cleaned them up and published them. And uh, People said, then asked, well, what's next? And I was like, well,
Hmm.
that's it. I don't have any more interviews. I've used them all. But then, the light bulb went off at some point. And I went, well, I'll just do new ones.
Hmm.
So I did Direct Conversations, which came out last year. And that was interviews with 10 of my peers, people I got into the business with in 1975, like, Paul Levitz and Howard Chaykin and Joe Staten and Steve Mitchell, a bunch of those guys. And as a follow-up to that, I decided to talk to a whole variety of creators from, Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway up through, Tom King and Mike Oming, about creativity, about what sparked their creativity, who inspired them, who and what inspired them.
Hmm. So, I mean, that's you're talking to a lot of these professionals over who have started their careers over the course of many different decades. Is there
Sure.
any commonalities you find amongst these very talented people that you can go, sorry, they can go, this is what it takes then to be great? Because look at this commonality between all these writers.
DeMatteis, that's right. It was Mark DeMatteis. We in the interview we were talking, and he said, "There's a chemical in your brain. As a kid, you look at a comic book, and you either go boing, or you just go okay. And why do some kids, my cousins who were around the same age as me and my older brother, who was, also in the business. He was an artist for Marvel and National Lampoon. Uh, we saw comic books, and off we went. My younger brother saw comic books, and I don't know if he's ever read one in his life. my cousins who lived right next door and were exposed to the same thing, the same people and the same stuff. I would remember I was 12 or 13 years old and I was talking to them about, Superman and something Lex Luthor, and they had no idea who Lex Luthor was. And this is 1968,
Right.
something like that. So, some kids just fall for it and others it means nothing. And then there are those of us who, just become the hardcore addicts, you know.
Oh, I've been buying comic books now since 1989. So,
Oh,
uh,
you're a newbie. Yeah.
yeah, it's where comics get into your blood. I kind of, maybe it's a sad way to describe, but I kind of find it like almost like meeting new friends. Like every month, you get to revisit your friends and see what's going on with them. You get to enjoy their adventures for the one. And I must say, it gets in your blood. It's hard to walk away.
I like heroin, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Gotta go to Comic Books Anonymous and try to solve it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, it really is an addiction, I don't read new comics anymore, and I haven't for years because frankly, once I stopped getting them for free, it was like, I'm not paying $5 for a comic book.
Hmm.
Or 12 cents the last time I paid for them.
Yeah.
But I still read, I still have reprints on the shelf back there, and I'll still look at stuff. And I was in a comic shop yesterday, and there was a Strange Tales, an old Strange Tales up on the wall, and it was modern age and well, the early '60s, but it was a Kirby thing with Submariner versus the Human Torch, and it was just like, yeah, that's a comic book cover, it's still there. I still love the stuff. I'm no longer the audience, I think. I'm 69 years old. I'm not well, I will be in June. So I'm still young. I'm still only 68. Um, I'm not the audience for these books anymore, and rather than read them and bitch and moan about the stuff that I'm not the audience for anyway, I don't read them.
That's probably the healthiest way to go about it. Because I'm sure if you've been any time on social media, there's a lot of whining going around about what's not theirs anymore. I'm thinking to myself, not everything was written for you, guy. Not everything was written just for you. There's a whole group of audiences that are not you that's also being written for.
People complain about stuff they haven't even seen yet based on what they assume it's going to be.
Yeah. It's
How do
kind
you do that?
it's kind of fun. I had my one of my other interviews I had just recently was Tom DeFalco, and
Uh-huh.
talking about the black costume for Spider-Man,
Right.
and he's like, people are so angry about it before the issue even came out. I was like, things have not changed. That was the 1980. Things have not changed in 40 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just it's frightening sometimes.
Hmm.
I don't get it. I can I don't have to like what they do in a movie or a TV show, but I also know that the original is still, back there in print somewhere, and I
Hmm.
can always find that and read it. It doesn't the bad movie or TV show doesn't negate the comic book or the character.
Do you think social media has been good or bad for the comic book industry?
Well, I don't know. I honestly, I think it's got good and bad. The good is, it's enabled independent creators to get out there and promote their own stuff. I without social media, I wouldn't raise $5,600 so far for direct creativity. I wouldn't have been able to, publish a book like this without it,
Hmm.
without the internet, without social media. It allows, it gives a lot of people freedom. On the other hand, internet, social media accounts are like assholes. Everyone's got one, and most of them stink.
Right.
So, you know, it's it 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 depends on how it's used and who's using it and for what purpose. I mean, I I have a strictly, no professional bashing policy on my page.
Hmm.
I don't want to hear it. I don't like a lot of people. There are a lot of people that if I said out loud that I don't care for their work, people would jump down my throat like I was Hitler. But you know, it doesn't matter. Why would I possibly want to piss on somebody's enjoyment of
Hmm.
that artist? just because I don't like it. You enjoy and you leave me to like, I like Paul Reinman.
Mm,
Leave me alone.
mm. Now, when you interview
You
these,
don't even know who Paul Reinman is, do you?
I was
Yeah.
nodding my head as if I did, though.
Yeah, you did, but you don't know.
So, having interviewed these 18 professionals, was there certain names that keep popping up, either inspiration or gave them advice that you can be like, hey, this person was instrumental to this number of talent either before or current?
Most of the inspiration came indirectly. There were people who will, talk to you about their mentors
Hmm.
and the people guided them. But for the most part, it was like, well, I read these guys and I studied their work, and that's the inspiration. It's kind of a secondhand thing rather than direct contact with these people. I was being inspired. I never got to meet Gardner Fox, but his Flash of Two Worlds as is just, it made me a comic book fan. It made me a hardcore fan because it took place on my birthday. And when I saw that the first time, when it was reprinted in a 1965 Flash annual, it was just like, the multiverse was born on my birthday.
Hmm.
You
That's
know, how are you not suck? I told Mark Waid that story, and he went, "That's a gift." And I'm sure he was jealous that his birthday wasn't on it. So, um, yeah, it's just, again, it goes back to that brain chemical. It just, you see it, man, and it hits you. I just the wonder and the awe. I remember being able to have access to DC Comics as a kid, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid just allowed to walk through the door because, I was known. I was doing fanzines. They knew who I was. They knew my face. Uh, and the first conventions, the early shows in the 70s, Phil Souling's New York Comic Cons, where 3,000 people showed up, and we thought that was every fan in the world, you know. So it was just an amazing time, and I was lucky to, I feel lucky to be in it. Although, now again, like I say, going to be 69 this year. I wish I, you know, been born 30 years later and gotten into it, because that would have been my golden age 30 years later. That,
Hmm.
you know, and I wouldn't be old.
Well, like I said, I mean, I really like the list of your people. Some of your more recent writers, like Tom King,
Right.
were these people who you helped, or because they're once again the new generation of
Mhm.
superstars.
Same thing. Same thing. They just, they met comic books and they were conquered. That was it. There was no contest. Every one of them. Mindy Newell, who was a writer in the 80s. She worked on Lois Lane and other things. Um, she was a 30-year-old nurse working in an an OR nurse, with a single mother with a child, and she decided on a whim to take the t- to submit something to DC New Talent Showcase.
Mm,
And Karen Berg, she just sat down one rainy afternoon and wrote a story, sent it off, and Karen Berger liked it, and she started to have a career out of that. But it was in her all along. She had read the stuff as a kid, and kept reading it. She was in a stressful job, and she would said, the hospital I worked in had a great newsstand in the lobby, and I would pick up my comic books there.
mm,
So, it just everybody, once it hits you, and if you have that spark of talent, some of us it needs more developing than others, but you know, it's just there, and if you're smart, you'll fight it and become a CPA or a plumber. But otherwise, if you got to do it, do it.
mm. Now, to talk about the campaign that you have right now for direct creativity, there's several tiers in the campaign. Some of them are for the other books that you worked on. So, can you
Right.
discuss some of the other books that are going to be part of these tiers?
Yeah, well, I already mentioned them. It's direct comments, direct creativity, and the Illustrated Guide to Writing Comics. Um, I thought those made a good set. But yeah, you can pick up any one, two, three, or four of them in combination. You can, there are, PDF of the books available as well. And, in direct conversations, the campaign did well enough that even though I didn't make it part of it, I got Adam Walenta, the artist, writer of Punk Taco, to do drawings, portraits of all the interviewees. And this time I made it a stretch goal and met it. So Adam is at work on those for this book as well.
I think it's a very cool thing, and I do like that you put in the stretch goals. I know I was reading your campaign here, and you were like, "There's not going to be any frills," and then you got but you did get the stretch goal, so you did get the added in the frills. So I do appreciate that. Must feel pretty good.
I really like the way it made the last book look, so I thought it would be nice to do that as well, and I might as well make it a feature instead of a surprise.
So when you put together the memoir that you mentioned, is that going to be also kickstarted, or you're going to just publish that outright?
I'll probably kickstart it just because it helps with the, kind of the awareness and getting it out there and getting it to people, the eight people who will really want it. So,
Now, the thing with the Kickstarters, which is kind of interesting, is that when they're as successful as yours are, there are a lot of time in there to in like fulfillment and things of that nature. So, how difficult is it to do the fulfillment? Difficult is it to properly determine the costs of printing and everything else that you're doing and shipping? How long did that take you to all figure out?
well, I mean, this is I've done several. Um, so, I'm kind of got it down, but everything is all pretty set. I know my production costs. I know my cost per book. With shipping and all that involved, and I know how much it costs to ship. So yeah, it's like any product. You just kind of sit down and figure out what the cost per unit is and go from there. And as far as the fulfilling goes, you just buy a shitload of envelopes and a subscription to stamps.com and go to it.
I would say, as having fulfilled my own Kickstarter last year, sees a certain level of organizational skills, which I think a lot of people don't have to handle the fulfillment aspect of it.
Well, I can be organized when I have to be. I otherwise, well, I'm by nature a neat freak. So I like to keep things nice and orderly and squared and in
Hmm.
shape. So usually I'm able to get through those things because I set up a production system and just do it.
So, between which dates is the campaign running for?
Well, the campaign is running until this coming Tuesday, the 27th at about 3:30 in the afternoon. So we've got about a bunch of hours left. About 60, it's about 68 to 7 or 8 hours left at this point. Yeah, I mean it's funded and I'm very grateful. We reached the goal in 3 days, which was just like amazing and very gratifying. And now it's all just to see how many more people want to join in. And after that, I'll have the book available through my website. It is all the books are on Amazon.com or again through my website, paulkupperberg.net. Uh, I wish I had I should have a sign to just hold up.
Well,
Uh,
I'll link the campaign to the and your website to the
okay.
interview as well, which is good.
Yeah.
Um, when the campaign ends, for those of the people who are watching this episode after, because obviously it's still going to be online after the campaign's over, are they going to be able to get the books themselves still, or is it once the campaign's over, access to the book is gone?
Oh no, no, no. Like I just said, it's I will be selling them through my website or and all my books are available on Amazon.com. So the books will continue to be available.
So, is the next thing released is going to be the memoir? That's the next thing you're going to be coming out with?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that if I do, I will do a Kickstarter. I'll launch it on my birthday, June 14th, because why not?
Oh, this year?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
It's written. All I'm doing is noodling and revising it at this point because, it's I've got a month to go before I'm going to do anything with it. So I'm just going to keep playing with it until I kill it. So,
So
but I'm
hopefully, so when it's ready to come out, can you come back on the show and talk about it?
absolutely.
That'd be absolutely awesome, and hopefully, I get a chance. I'm a chance to read it for it because it sounds fantastic. I would love to pick your brain more in the world of comic books. Because 49 years of knowledge, I get the feeling there's a lot you can teach me. Who it's on the edge of the comic book industry world, trying to get myself in.
Well, whatever I can do to convince you to run.
I think after 30 years of buying comic books, I think it's too late for now. I think I'm a lost cause at this point.
The fact that we're sitting here doing a podcast is proof of that. So
Yeah, the part that's really sad is that I'm now thinking of buying a bigger house because I have a house right now. And honest to God, one of the real reasons is that where I have my comic books now is getting too cramped. I need more space. So I'm thinking, you know what? I gotta buy a bigger house and make this work. Oh, Mr.
go ahead.
Kupperberg, I would say it's just been an honor speaking with you, sir. Thank you
Thank
so much for doing this.
you. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night, sir.
You too.